Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking apart what just might be the single most expensive lie in American life. It's this deeply ingrained idea that looking rich and being rich are the exact same thing. Spoiler alert, they absolutely are not. In fact, they're usually complete opposites, and the math behind this, it is brutal. So we're going to unpack exactly why looking poor is literally so important if you want to actually build and keep real wealth.
Okay, so let's start with a scenario we've all experienced, the driveway illusion. Picture a typical suburban cul-de-sac. You're standing on the sidewalk, just looking at two different driveways. We are completely socially conditioned to look at the shiny metal parked in those driveways and instantly calculate who's winning at life, right? But what happens when that appearance completely deceives us? What does actual wealth look like when you strip away the shiny paint?
Well, let's look at our two neighbors. In the first driveway, we've got Brandon. He's 42, a dermatologist, clearing 280 grand a year, and he's driving a leased BMW X5. But every third Sunday, he is up at 11 p.m., totally stressed out, frantically moving money between accounts just to make sure the kids' tuition check clears. Now, in the second driveway is Diane. She's 58, owns a local heating and air company, makes about $95,000 a year, and drives a 2018 Camry with a dent that nobody has ever bothered to fix. Yet last month, Diane casually wrote a check for her nephew's college tuition without even opening a banking app to check her balance. That right there, that's staggering $1.4 million. That is Diane's actual net worth. Brandon's net worth? It's a fraction of that, roughly $210,000, and mostly tied up in home equity he can't even touch without moving. Diane makes literally a third of what Brandon earns, yet she is vastly wealthier. At the neighborhood block party, everybody assumes Brandon is the rich one, including Brandon himself. It completely flips our societal assumptions about who the truly wealthy neighbor actually is. And this brilliantly illustrates the famous wealth formula developed by the late researcher Thomas Stanley. It's basically a quick way to check your financial trajectory. Let's walk through it together. You take your age, you multiply it by your pre-tax income, you divide by 10, and then subtract any inheritance. Just take a second and calculate that in your head. Okay, if you have double that final number in net worth, you are what he calls a prodigious accumulator of wealth. If you're at half or less, you're an underaccumulator. By this math, Brandon is sitting at a measly 18% of his target. Diane, she's at 2.5 times her target. But to really understand where Brandon's money is actually going, we have to look at the brutal math of depreciation. It's kind of the quietest wealth destroyer in the country. Over 5 years, an average new car loses about 45% of its value. Pretty bad, right? But look at the luxury signals. A BMW 7 Series loses 67%. And a Maserati loses over 70% of its value. The formula here is simple, but totally devastating. The more expensive the signal you send to your neighbors, the faster it financially decays right there in your driveway.
Let's break that depreciation down a bit, because the annual number really hides the daily pain. Losing $65,000 on a luxury car over 5 years, that translates to losing $36 every single day. Think about that. You are essentially feeding an invisible parking meter that charges you $36 a day just to sit in your garage, even on days you don't drive it, even when you're on vacation. It is just evaporating out of a parking space silently, all while the owner feels amazing just walking up to it.
So when you multiply that daily loss across an entire neighborhood, it builds into this shocking national reality. It's grim, but maybe not totally surprising, that 62% of the general population lives paycheck to paycheck. But look at the high earners. 48% of people making over $100,000 and 36% of those making over $200,000 are also running on fumes. A massive income doesn't automatically produce wealth. It just produces the option to build wealth, an option that a lot of folks willingly trade away for, heated seats and a fancy brand badge. When you map that out over time, you uncover Diane's secret. Let's price that trade. The gap between an average new car payment of $770 and a solid used car is about $470 a month. If you simply invest that $470 gap at a conservative 7% return, in 30 years, it becomes roughly $570,000. Diane simply refused to convert her raises into visible objects. Her massive net worth is, quite literally, Brandon's car payments pointed in the opposite, completely invisible direction. So, if the math of buying expensive things to look wealthy is so transparently bad,
We have to ask a much deeper psychological question here. Why do highly educated, super smart, high-earning people systematically trap themselves in this financial pressure cooker? Like, what is actually driving Brandon to stress out at 11 p.m. over his kids' tuition?
Well, it turns out looking stupidly expensive isn't a moral failing. It's actually a deeply ingrained historical signaling system. Way back in 1899, Thorstein Veblen coined the term conspicuous consumption. His blunt argument was that in a money-driven society, status doesn't come from quietly having resources. Nope, it comes from visibly wasting them. The reputational value lies in the waste itself. It's exactly like a peacock dragging around a massive, heavy, deeply impractical tail just to prove to the rest of the flock that it's strong enough to survive anyway.
And that behavior spreads like wildfire through what economist Robert Frank calls expenditure cascades. Basically, when the people at the very top spend more, they shift the baseline for what looks normal. They move the reference point down to the tier right below them, who then adjust their spending upwards, which pressures the tier below them all the way down the line. This perfectly explains that psychological pressure you feel. You are a downstream casualty of a status economy that spends billions of dollars to keep that frame constantly moving upward.
But guys, here is the absolute joke at the center of it all. Psychologist Thomas Gilovich tested how much people actually notice us, which is a phenomenon called the spotlight effect. Subjects guessed about 50% of people notice them. The reality, often under 10%. Think about that. You are financing a stressful lifestyle, paying almost $800 a month for 6 years, to impress an audience that is barely even paying attention. They are way too busy worrying about their own car to form an opinion on yours. And even the modern antidote to flashy logos got completely hijacked. Recently, the culture decided loud logos were tacky, and we all embraced quiet luxury, right? Stealth wealth. But capitalism is brilliant. Quiet luxury instantly became just another product category. Now, people are buying completely unbranded cashmere sweaters for $3,000. It's like a secret handshake that only works on other rich people. Meanwhile, 60% of buy now, pay later users admit they're using debt to buy things they cannot afford, purely to rent the appearance of wealth. And what does that money dysmorphia actually feel like for the consumer? It feels like a constant, low-level financial dread disguised as a harmless shopping habit. It's the anxiety of keeping up appearances, funded by money you literally haven't even earned yet.
So, the crucial point here is that we can't just ignore appearance entirely. Studies do show there is a genuine wage premium for looking presentable and put together. But look at what actually gets rewarded. Health, neatness, and fit. A cheap $40 shirt that is tailored to fit you perfectly will beat an untailored $400 designer shirt in literally every study. Being put together is cheap. Luxury badges on your chest, or on your car hood for that matter, offer absolutely zero return on investment.
And simply earning a massive income doesn't fix this underlying behavior. Research into actual bankruptcy court records shows that 15.7% of NFL players file for bankruptcy within 12 years of retiring. But you know what the most fascinating part is? That rate was essentially unrelated to how much money a player actually earned during his career. No way, right? It proves that you cannot out-earn a spending problem. Because if your lifestyle inflates to permanently match your absolute best earning year, even millions of dollars can't protect you from a total financial collapse.
The reality is, true wealth often looks incredibly boring. Look at Warren Buffett. He still lives in the same exact Omaha house he bought in 1958 for $31,500. Or Chuck Feeney, who built a massive duty-free empire, wore a cheap little Casio watch, and didn't even own a car. He literally gave away his entire $8 billion fortune anonymously while walking around looking like an average, everyday tourist. If you passed either man in a grocery store, you would never, ever guess their net worth. Looking poor is simply the strongest lever available to a high earner who actually wants to keep their money.
Let's look at what might be the most useful number in personal finance, your savings rate. If you simply decide not to spend your next raise on a lifestyle upgrade and you jump your savings rate from 10% to 20%, you just bought back over 13 years of your working life. You literally cut a decade of mandatory work off your timeline, just by letting your savings rate absorb your raise before your lifestyle even finds out it happened.
Which brings us to the absolute ultimate definition of financial success. Wealth is what you don't see. And that's not just a metaphor. It is literal arithmetic. Your net worth is made entirely of the dollars you did not convert into visible objects. It's the unbought cars, the skipped kitchen renovations, the unpurchased designer clothes. True financial freedom is permanently invisible to your neighbors. Anyone looking wealthy is just showing you the exact portion of their wealth they already gave up.
So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The next time you're sitting in a showroom or holding your phone about to make a major financial decision, financing will almost always tell you yes, you can afford the monthly payment. But the real question, the one nobody ever asks, is this: who am I buying this for? And are they actually looking? According to the data, they aren't. Keep your money invisible. Thanks for joining me for this explain.